Bonsoir. Donc, je vais faire quelques mots d'introduction, comme ça aussi on gagne un peu de temps pour les retardataires. Donc, et avant de laisser la parole à des protagonistes de cette soirée, donc bienvenue à Éware, je suis vraiment ravie, enfin nous sommes ravis de vous voir aussi nombreux, aussi nombreuses à cette soirée assez exceptionnelle intitulée « Persona et son ombre, la résistance des femmes ukrainiennes dans les arts et la littérature ». Donc moi je suis Mathilda Tachitska, je suis responsable des programmes scientifiques ici à Éware. Je vais essayer d'être brève. Donc le commissariat de cet événement a été confié à Oksana Karpovets, une curatrice historienne de l'art ukrainien basée depuis peu à Paris. Nous sommes ravis d'avoir, nous, des illustres invités que Oksana Karpovets présentera tout à l'heure plus longuement. Donc d'abord Oksana Zabushko, l'écrivaine ukrainienne majeure, connue pour ses écrits féministes, romans, poésie, essais, critiques, et les artistes et curatrices de la jeune génération, Oksana Bryukhovecka et Anna Sherbina. Donc, Oksana Bryukhovecka va intervenir sur Zoom depuis chez elle, alors que Anna Sherbina est arrivée de Berlin hier soir et va présenter une lecture performance voilà, pour clore notre soirée. Donc, merci beaucoup de votre présence. Ce dialogue intergénérationnel, y compris avec des artistes historiques qui ne sont plus là, que vous verrez tout à l'heure, et qui ont marqué l'histoire de l'art ukrainien et demeurent malheureusement toujours pas assez connus des spécialistes et du grand public occidental. Ce dialogue, il fait partie de l'ADN d'Éware, dans le sens où nous sommes une association qui s'est entièrement dédiée à la défense, à la visibilisation de l'art des artistes femmes, des artistes qui s'identifient comme femmes et depuis peu aussi des artistes non binaires. Une association qui a été fondée en 2014 par Camille Morino, qui est une historienne de l'art conservatrice française, qui a grandi et aura bientôt, fêtera ses 10 ans l'année prochaine. Et depuis 2021, nous avons établi notre siège ici, donc à la Villa, où nous cherchons à créer un programme interdisciplinaire et intergénérationnel qui se situe justement entre nos deux engagements. À la fois, il se veut situer dans l'espace qui est celui de l'espace parisien et de la région, avec toutes les artistes internationales qui vivent en fait ici. Et Paris a une longue histoire d'échanges et de réseaux d'artistes qui ont traversé en fait sa vie, certains temporairement, d'autres se sont installés de manière permanente ici. Et enfin notre programme international, car à travers nos programmes de recherche et un très vaste réseau de chercheurs et chercheuses à travers le monde entier, on essaye de couvrir sur notre site internet des sujets et des zones géographiques extrêmement vastes. Donc aujourd'hui, ce site internet contient plus de 1100 biographies d'artistes femmes. It's a work in progress, dans le sens où bien évidemment toutes les artistes ne sont toujours pas là, et d'ailleurs c'est aussi le cas de beaucoup d'artistes ukrainiennes, et nous espérons que dans les prochaines années on pourra compléter justement ces manques sur notre site. C'est un site aussi internet qui atteint jusqu'à 100 000 visiteurs et visiteuses uniques par mois, donc c'est une ressource qui aujourd'hui est très consultée, aussi bien par les professionnels que par les grands publics. Et enfin, voilà, depuis 2021, il y a aussi ce lieu qui est un centre de documentation, donc une bibliothèque. Donc cette rencontre aura lieu pas dans une salle de conférence ou dans un théâtre, mais dans une bibliothèque qui, de temps en temps, se transforme en un lieu de rencontre et d'échange. Et nous espérons donc que cet échange sera enrichissant et intéressant pour vous tous et toutes. Donc là, je cède la parole à Oksana Karpovets, qui est donc commissaire et tête pensante de l'événement. Ah oui, et j'ai quand même oublié de remercier différentes personnes sans lesquelles ça n'aurait pas été possible. Donc je voulais remercier notre partenaire extrêmement flexible, formidable de dernière minute, qui est l'Institut ukrainien en France et qui hier soir a apporté son soutien à l'événement. Je voulais remercier mes collègues, Nina Volz, Zina Kemouche, Mélanie Soukraïb, qui ont beaucoup travaillé à la mise en place de cet événement. Je devrais les nommer toutes, mais je n'arriverai pas. Et Katia Silvanovic, qui, il y a quelques mois, était d'ailleurs un peu la personne motrice de notre rencontre avec Oksana Karpovets. Donc merci beaucoup et bonne soirée.
Thank you so much for coming. The event will be in English, not in French.
Oh yes, I forgot.
So the event was consists on several parts. It will be 3 presentations. First, we will start with Oksana Zabushka, famous Ukrainian writer, essayist, feminist, philosopher, and the major voice of Ukraine abroad. Today, she's traveled all over the world and present Ukrainian culture, literature on major artistic and book fairs and political arena as well. It will be a 20-minute presentation with a possibility to ask questions at the end. Then it will be Oksana Prikhovetska. It's a creator, artist, and writer. She is famous by doing exhibitions in Ukraine and internationally on the topic of women art, and she was one of the leading, I would say, creator who started to work with this issue. She was awarded with Igor Zabel Award for art and culture, and then it will be also 20 minutes, and we will switch to Anna Sherbina's presentation. It will be performative reading, as Matilda already mentioned, and performative reading will be also 20 minutes and the possibility of ask questions at the end. And just to tell a little bit more about the concept, so it's intergenerational, like Matilda already said. We want to just track or follow this through generations, understanding how women body connected to colonial politics, how women were finding their voice to talk about politics, their position in the society in different conditions, in the conditions of the beginning of the 20th century, in the middle of the century when it was Stalin epocha, and how it was transforming in the 90s with the independence, how women realized themselves in the society, and then how women artists work today, how they what changing, what the tendencies are. And we are looking through different disciplines. We are looking through literature and through key figures in literature in Ukraine and through art. So we will mention who will be mentioned in presentations. And I think it's very important, and we are very thankful for this opportunity to talk about this issue, because I don't think that in France it was something dedicated to Ukrainian women artists or Ukrainian women writers by this point. So we are grateful for the support, for this voice, and this all about voice. How women were finding their voice in different situations, and how they find this voice today when there is a war, and when they are still working on that, and fighting and resisting and communicating what's happening in Ukraine to the world. Thank you so much. Yes, and we will start with Oksana Zabushka's presentation.
Bonsoir. Merci beaucoup pour votre introduction. I got a little bit scared while Matilda was speaking because I was promised that it's going to be an English, that the whole night will be in English, so I immediately started to translate what I was having in my mind, to translate my presentation into French, and then I gave up. So it's a big relief, yeah. Thank you all for coming, and I have to excuse myself at the very beginning because 20 minutes, of course, it's nothing. It's basically to make a couple of points, so I really can't on the discussion afterwards, in the end, yeah, after all three presentations.
Yes, we will have some cocktail as well. So we after presentation we have question answers.
After all three presentations.
After your presentation, we will have more time.
Okay, good. Because 20 minutes, well, it's just I'm not good. I'm terrible at timing, and 20 minutes is just. Well, I would say two Zabushko sentences. Basically. So to make it three, okay, I'll try to summarize a couple of points, you know, which struck me when I was reading an annotation, the description of tonight's event. Yeah, okay, it's a great concept, looking for the shadow, yes, and but the idea of discussing, you know, what struck me and what I'd like to question a little bit, what I have to question, is like why Ukrainian women's movement started later, was belated as compared to the Western feminist movements. It sounds a little bit colonial to my ear, and by saying colonial I refer rather to the usage of the term which Roland Barthes suggested in his La division de langue. He speaks of the colonial approach to the language, whenever this language is regarded as a kind of a deviation from some allegedly established norm. I think it's a kind of our post-colonial disease, a part of our post-colonial disease, to imagine there is some established norm, after which we have to evaluate our culture and our cultural achievements, whether we fit or whether we don't. I'm trying somehow to get rid, you know, of this mental inertia, because I do believe that, to use Tolstoy's expression that every family is miserable in its own way, well, I believe every women's group is miserable in its own way all over the world, and it depends on the peculiarities of the local culture, it depends on cultural difference and historical traditions and so on and so forth. And I'll start with this picture. Actually, I feel, you know, very much tempted to have it behind me all the time because it is very inspiring. For those of you who don't know what it's about, it was not on the French media last fall, was it?
Was it?
It was, yes. It was, yeah. So a very brief explanation. These are Ukrainian women warriors who were released from the Russian captivities after several months of captivity on October 17, 2022, some 13 months ago. And that's how they were crossing the border. When released of the buses, they started to march. Look at their stature, look at their faces. The country should, it's definitely the message. A very strong political and feminist message too. The country should be proud of her girls. Our task is to show that we return invincible, okay? And so they do look invincible, which looks great, and the picture sells great, and of course it's very inspiring and everything. The point, however, is that those of you who happened to watch videos with the male warriors returning from the same Russian captivities during these 20 months of Ukrainian-Russian war, well, you can immediately see how striking is the difference. Our boys, our heroes, our boys, loved by everyone, our, well, protectors, our everything, well, they don't need to demonstrate anything. They don't need to prove anything. They just, they behave very individually. Okay, some of them just fall down on their knees and kiss the land, and it looks like a very natural gesture, you know, after having spent, you know, months under the tortures, having lost from 20 to 60 kilos weight, and most of them look like the prisoners of Nazi concentration camp or something. So yeah, of course, they cry. They are not ashamed of crying. They don't need to prove that they were worth all this sweat on the part of the country, that they were worth all these collective efforts to liberate them, that they are worth their salary as the warriors, that they are just what they are. Women, well, they still need to prove they are good at what they are. And if asked, if I were asked what, in my opinion, is to be the second sex in the 21st century, that's precisely it. You still have to prove, being a woman, you still have to prove you are worth at what you are. Not at where you are, because, okay, men also have to do this, you know, at the early stages of their career, and I mean, that's kind of normal, yeah? Well, but at what you are. And yes, this, as we can see, did not change much, even though we have, you know, this image of strong women, you know, women who have found themselves in the army and who are good at the army, who are good in the army. Ukrainian, of the Ukrainian army, about 30% staff are women, and over 5,000 of them are serving on the front. And and the most popular profession is the drone operator, the most popular female profession. So yes, I mean, the reversion of the gender roles is gradually taking place, and there are lots of things happening with regard to the equal rights within the army, and I'm not going, to take much of a time with that, because it's been just, by way of introduction. To explain what I'm driving at, but I think it's a very good way to understand the core of the problem, of this problem of the shadow we are looking for. Because yes, Ukraine is known to be a culture of strong women. It's part of the tradition. It's been for centuries the frontier country where men go to the war, and it's women's responsibility to support the uninterrupted flowing of life in the rear. Which included not just, childbearing and home care, but which included, providing economy, managing with many things which in happier or better protected Western empires of the time had been delegated fully to men. And yes, in Ukraine, I'm saying this, by half joke, but my favorite explanation is we were not burning our witches. We were not having, in the period of religious wars, we were not having these witch-burning processes. It's only a half joke, as you understand, because yes, we have preserved until the modern times women's right to own an unalienated property. Something our Western sisters, which had to plunge into feminist movement in the 19th century, as they were deprived of that right, were lacking. In Ukraine there is a special word for that, property inherited along maternal line. Not the dowry that a woman brings into the marriage, but her own property, which she keeps for herself and then passes to her daughters, or to the sons, to her sons, in case she doesn't have daughters. And then you have names after maternal lines. Ivanishyn, Petreshin, Sidoreshin, the son of Ivanica, Petrecha, Sidorecha. So that's something, which partly answers the question, why Ukrainian women were having, more degrees of freedom, in the early modern time as compared to their more bourgeois sisters in the better arranged countries in the West. Briefly speaking, as one German ethnologist indignantly described it when traveling over the Russian Empire and studying its tribes, so to speak. The little Russians allowed their women talking in public. He did not like that at all, because he thought it was a total disorder, you know, when women start speaking, you know, high-pitched voices and everything looks very unusual, different. Okay, now, Lucy Irigaray was not yet born, but yes, women's sentence probably was back in the 19th century, you know, was strikingly different from the men's one, but yes, to be serious, yes, women were in the countryside, in the small towns and villages, women in Ukraine, after the statutes of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, until the late 19th century, where these no full-fledged members of community. So the story of Ibsen's Nora, of a poor doll who is locked in her home, sitting, you know, cooking, knitting, Kinderküche, Kirche, and all this business. Well, that came later, that started in Galicia, in the Catholic part of the, characteristically in the Catholic part of the country, and probably by no coincidence it was in Galicia that the feminist movement started to shape itself in Ukraine institutionally. In 1884, the Association of Ruthenian Women was founded in then Stanislaw, nowadays Ivano-Frankivsk, and so since then, you know, we can track the proper institutional history of Ukrainian women's movement, so to speak. Well, but of course, you know, it is, I mean, corresponding to all these standards described by the Western feminists, you know, but it doesn't mean that women were not having the voice of their own, because because in fact, yes, Ukraine does boast one of the strongest traditions of women writings in Slavic literature. The first recorded Ukrainian poem in literary tradition dating back to 1575 was written by a woman, Olena Zhoravnetska. And some 2/3 of Ukrainian folk songs, Maximovich calculated in mid-19th century, yes, were authored by women. So these are the songs of female voice, with all the female issues, including family problems, childbearing, and motherhood, and well, whatever. That in its turn brings us to a stereotype, I would say to a different type of discrimination from that of Ibsen's Nora, which is very deeply rooted in our culture and in our tradition. The problem is that, yes, we have to be strong, we are supposed to be strong, but we can't count on being recognized in that quality. So, my personal reaction when I had a first look at this picture of our girls coming from the captivity, returning back home from the captivity, was, oh my God, yes, we all were learning Lesya Ukrainka's poem in a school. Я была малою горда, щоб не плакать, я сміялась. Every schoolgirl remembers that. We are supposed to learn that by heart. as a little girl, in my childhood, I was prideful, I was laughing in order not to cry. So like a kind of a, manifestation of strength. At least that's how it is taught at schools, and yes, I reiterate, it is in our, in our textbooks, and it is in our memory, and it's been probably in the memory of these girls who made a perfect, maybe unconsciously, but that's how the heritage works. It does work on this subconscious level. Okay, not to cry, you have to laugh. Okay, let's start marching. Noses up, looking beautiful. Okay, here we go. The problem is that this same poem has 2 more stanzas which no one remembers. And it is actually a kind of those poems that poets write for themselves, a kind of a diary, diary poem, polemicizing with the critics of the time. And these remaining 2 stanzas refer to the current time, and nowadays, when a drama of my life takes turns into some bad joke, and I am tempted to make a caustic, to blurt out a caustic epigram, a venomous caustic epigram or something like this, I'm afraid of my own laughter, and I cry in order not to laugh. It gives me chills, every time I think about it, because basically it's a poem on self-censorship. It is a very bitter, yes, very caustic, very bitter, very wise poem of a mature woman who does know something about struggling for herself, and who already has elaborated this kind of a distant look, at all the mundane things, so to speak, who knows how the world is running, briefly speaking, and who is afraid of her own laughter, kind of King Lear's laughter, that we can hear resonating behind these lines. No one remembers that. Everyone remembers «Я була малою горда, щоб не плакать, я сміялась». I was prideful as a little girl, I was laughing so as not to cry. But no one remembers the continuation. And this, I would say, mystery of misinterpretation, or mystery of silences certain parts of women's self. Oh goodness, how much time do I have?
I think we have 10 minutes more.
10 minutes more? Okay, bless you, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I already wrote to everyone that we are a little bit...
It's included in the project.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to make it. I'll try to, and who, if not Ukrainka herself, even though a feminist of a second generation, a woman who belonged to the privileged class, to the nobility of the Russian Empire. She was born in a very well-situated family. Her father was, how do they call it, active state councillor, according to the table of ranks of Russian officials. It's a very high-ranked official. It's like rank 4 or from the top or something, tantamount to general in army or admiral in the navy. And her mother herself was one of the leading feminists of her time, feminists and nationalists. Feminist nationalism is again something that differs Central and Eastern Europe from Western Europe, because in our part of Europe, be it starting with Italy of the time of Risorgimento in the mid-19th century, and then going eastward and northway, you know, it was, I would say it was this nation-building movements that were opening public space for women. And feminism was introduced as a part of the general liberation movement, of which nationalism of the 19th century was an indigenous part. So it was not, you know, just by, you know, mere coincidences that many of these first feminists, be it in Poland or Finland or Ukraine, were nationalists, socialists and feminists. So that was, you know, the combination which looks unusual in the context of the old empires. We all remember Virginia Woolf saying that as a woman she has no nation, yeah? Okay, you can afford saying something like this when you don't feel endangered, when you don't feel that your state is endangered, or the very existence of your country is endangered, or the very existence of your language is endangered. Okay, if your country rules over the waves, you know, according to the words of this famous Rule Britain anthem, well, okay, then you have, I would say, more space for self-determination in gender terms. While in the 19th century, yeah, Olena Pchilka, Lesya Ukrainka's mother, was both ardent nationalist and ardent feminist. She, along with Natalia Kobrinska, I'm afraid I don't have time to. I will just show the picture by Lesya Ukrainka.
Yes.
Okay. I have to do another. I owe you one more trick that I have in preparation. I've done my homework. Yeah, and I'm going to demonstrate it no matter what, even though I have still 8 minutes for everything.
Oh.
Okay. I think it's noteworthy that Lesya Ukrainka is the only woman pictured on Ukrainian money. One and only woman. Even though in Ukraine it were women who were founding our universities in the early modern period. Our John Harvards were Halska Ostrowska, who donated, I don't remember the exact sum, but for Ostrog Academy, the first Eastern European University, 1579, yeah. And Elizaveta Hulevich, who donated her piece of land downtown Kiev, along with all the mentions to Kiev Mohyla Academy. This is still the territory. This is still the territory of Kiev Mohyla Academy. And Елизавeta Miloradovich, the aunt of Hetman Skoropadsky, who in 1863, after Valuyev's decree banning the public usage of the Ukrainian language and the printing of Ukrainian books, textbooks for the children included, donated some 11,000 Austrian rinskis for founding a Ukrainian printing house in Galicia, and that's how Shevchenko Scientific Society was founded there, and that's how all the cultural life banned in the Tsarist Russia was relocated, using the contemporary military term, to the Western Ukraine, then part of Austria-Hungary. So we owe to that woman, but she's none of these women is on the money. No. Lesya Ukrainka is one and only, and notably, I don't know, well, not very good quality, of course, but take my word for that. This is the picture of Lesya Ukrainka at the age of 14. Yes. A pretty girl. A pretty girl, a good girl, or in terms of Ivan Franko, the highest literary authority of the time, she herself was addressing him in her letters in French, like cher maître. He was 15 years her senior. So in his review, he tailored this formula for a strong girl of the Ukrainian literature. This literally sounds, this weak, sickly girl seems to be the only true man in our entire present-day united Ukraine, meaning both in the Austrian and the Russian parts of the country, united. The only man, okay, a very, I would say, doubtful compliment designed to shame Ukrainka's male contemporaries, male counterparts, for their feeble and nervous writings. That's another quotation. Feeble and nervous. So, okay, that's a very, efficient and typical also pedagogical trick. Okay, look at this girl, look how strong she is, so be ashamed, you are not. In the same time, Franco made a very characteristic faux pas, complimenting Ukrainka's debut in poetry this way. He made a verdict that nowadays sounds, well, I'm sorry, stupid. Dramas, he said, don't belong to Ukrainka's talent. And she has already published her debut drama, The Possessed, which completely changed the landscape of Ukrainian modernism. It's not that Franco's taste was so underdeveloped. Again, it is something that Elaine Shaw-Walter was describing as a typical way for women in literature. First, we start with imitating the dominating male tradition. Then we start opposing it, trying to overcome it, to deconstruct it, and then we develop the voice of our own. well, the third stage. So it's exactly on the first stage, when you are this 14 years old girl who is writing in male's voice better than men do, that you are welcome. But not as the author of 20 dramas that completely changed, as I said, the landscape of Ukrainian literary modernism, and not only Ukrainian. I never fail to repeat that it is a horrible loss, like a black hole in the history of European literature of the 20th century, that Lesya Ukrainka is missing in it. Because what she has performed, what she has accomplished in her 20 dramas is, I would describe as a reappropriation of the entire European cultural history from men. Rewriting it from a woman's standpoint. Her story of the Trojan War is the story of not Achilles, not Hector, but Cassandra. 5-act drama of a woman, intellectual, knowing that the Belle Epoque is coming to an end, written in 1908, this sense of the looming catastrophe already in the air, yeah. Well, and totally helpless, well, to stop the tanks, as I'm saying now, 100 years after, yeah. All your warnings don't work, none of your warnings works until the gate of the Troy falls down. And her story of Christ, she has 6 dramas on history, on early Christianity. So her story of Christ has 2 women's protagonists, one Miriam, Mary Magdalene, another the character which is more than once forgotten from the Gospel of Luke, Johanna, the wife of Huza. Who was with one of those women who were with Christ and who were not, you know, ascribed to the apostles. So it is kind of a, you know, the attempt to review this early Christian history, giving a name, giving a place to women in it. Well, and her story of Don Juan, again, it's great, fantastic, fantastically done, superb deconstruction. Half of a century before Julia Kristeva did the same in her essay on Don Juan. Total deconstruction of Don Juan myth, with 2 women again as main character, one Donna Anna, well, which is generally known in the tradition of Don Juan's story in European literature, another Dolores invented by Ukrainka. And yes, one is, I mean, I'm not going to give you spoilers, especially that I don't have time for that. Well, but, and I was, okay, do I have 5 minutes?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for your kindness, yes. So, and with all this really, and I don't mention even here her prose. Well, that was very feminist. I would say very much ahead of time, very much about female bodily experience, including the issues which took then European literature 2 generations or something just to pronounce, like puberty and erotic burdening or awakening female sexuality in puberty. Friendship, novella or story, which, by the way, a couple of years ago I was seeing this film by French film director Rebecca Zolotowski, My Summer with Sophie. That's kind of the same plot, you know, this the awakening sexuality in a girl who is influenced or I would say, you know, charmed by her more sexually advanced girlfriend. And that's been really very new in the early 20th century. The trauma of the late childbearing, prima gravida, a woman pregnant and at 40, and her sister warning her that people will be joking at her. And goodness, I mean, it's all, you know, so subtle, so vibrant, and so blatantly ignored by contemporaries. Because all these issues were not, okay, partly because, yeah, she was, I mean, as Ukrainian literature was, I would say, forcefully separated due to the Tsarist politics from its readership. Lesya Ukrainka never actually had this immediate contact with her public, and according to later sociological studies, she just was not having a public. She was having just, you know, this narrow circle of beta readers, of her milieu, and basically that was it. So she just was not encouraged in her prose writing. Theater, yes, Ukrainian theater was thriving, so she was stubbornly writing one drama after drama in a vain hope that one of them one day will see the stage. At least there was a chance. Otherwise it was, you know, writing in the air, so to speak. In the presence of, I don't know, imaginary shadows, in the dialogue with all those imaginary shadows, starting from Cassandra, Mary Magdalene, and Joanna, the wife of Huza, and ending, you know, with her women friends, women of her generation, which was the first generation of women, well, as I said before, the second feminist generation in Ukraine, and the first generation of women who already were fighting for the right for education. And here, since I'm, of course, you know, yeah, and here I have to make a couple, goodness, I just need, okay, I count on questions. I strongly count on questions. Please, I encourage you to ask questions because I really have, I mean, it was just a brief summary, as I said at the beginning, of what I was going to say in my presentation. But I just can't avoid an issue of this an issue of this picture which we were having at the opening, the picture of Kateryna Bilokour. Because no matter, you know, how, yes, no matter how, no matter how much we may deplore the fate of those women who were silenced or misinterpreted or tamed, you know, to pose as sickly, weak girls or whatever, well, what came afterwards in the after the Bolshevik coup, and especially in the Stalin's times, in this Stalin's epoch. Of course, it's absolutely incomparable to the position of those noble women coming from the Ukrainian late hetmanate elite, whom we now regard as the part of the, there is a special term now, clandestine, Ukrainian clandestine government. When Ukraine was a non-existent, did not exist on the political map, and so the clandestine government, this group, you know, of educated mobility, whom we now, you know, celebrated the fathers and mothers of the nation. Okay, you know, they were doing their job, and we owe them more than we can imagine. But, you know, after 1917 and after 1933, when Ukraine was pacified with the man-made famine, well, the fate, this destiny of being a woman in Ukrainian culture really deserves a special attention and a library of dissertations, because every such case is just an act of a lifetime heroic struggle. And Kateryna Bilokour, with regard to her background, is a total opposite to Lesya Ukrainka. Why I'm talking, I mean, I'm not going to discuss her paintings. I'm not an art critic. I've done a long essay on her using her letters. Because this woman was a genius, that's without any doubt can be said. She was a genius, and that was a really cruel experiment that history made in village Bogdanivka in the first half of the 20th century. We have a strict answer to the question whether a genius will survive in slavery, with absolutely no chance, no glimpse of hope, no chance, no assistance, absolutely nothing, no education, not a day in school, an autodidact, complete autodidact who learned to read from her brother's textbook, because born in 1900, she belonged to the generation of farmers which were not sending their daughters to schools. The boys were sent to schools, the girls were not. And if Kateryna already can read, already knows how to read, then why waste efforts on sending her to school? It's better to teach her to do embroidery and all the other necessary things. So in a way, you know, this can be modeled after a story of a woman fighting for her rights against her petit bourgeois family. Okay, if you think of farmers, of free farmers as petite bourgeoisie, yes, okay, that was the struggle with the family. A woman who refused to marry because she was having a very serious conversation with her fiancé, whom she said overtly that yes, she will marry him only under the condition that she will be allowed to paint in her free time. And his reaction was like, "Are you crazy? There have never been women painters in entire history." Well, there were. Yes, we all know that there were, but yes, well, you have to be, they were not in the textbooks that this boy was taught after. So the reason Kateryna Bilokour is known a genius of this fantastic flowery landscape where she was inventing the flowers of her own, and I think someone had to teach her, after all, how to just technical, technical skills like to prime canvas, or well, she was making her own brushes, very thin, to make the stroke invisible. So in the original, this landscapes looks, this still life, well, they look like transparent, with these brushes in 2 or 3 hairs, Well, so she elaborated her own style in that. After she picked up in the village library the volume by Gorky, Maxim Gorky, who was a compulsory reading in every Soviet city, in every Soviet village, in every Soviet town. And there she found a story about some Russian tradesman who brought from Paris a painting, a still life, a vase with flowers, a very beautiful one and very expensive one too, painted by a woman, Rosa Bonheur. So that's how she learned, like picking up a note from the bottle, that a woman painted flowers. So even though there were no women painters in human history, okay, at least there is this one who painted flowers. I can do flowers. As a woman, I can do flowers. And let's not forget, that this was after everything, all that was happening in the village, in the Ukrainian village, already pacified by Stalin, pacified by collectivization, and where the conditions of living were comparable, well, I think closest to what now is in Northern Korea, without any exaggeration. There was a permanent starvation. There were extremely miserable, meager living conditions. In one of her letters, when she is invited to come to Kiev for some gathering of folk artists, she replies angrily that she cannot arrive because she has no boots. She did not have boots. She had to do all the, work in the field and was allowed to paint only in her spare time, which was not much, of course. And this entire life of this extreme extenuation of human efforts which resulted in those beautiful, beautiful landscape, was, I think, crowned with the also one of the most probably toxic frauderies in the history of arts, because her paintings painted, you know, against all the circumstances of her living, were noticed after World War II and presented outside of the Soviet Union, presented abroad as a proof of a happy life of Soviet kolkhoz workers. And in 1957, yes, they arrived here to Paris. There was in Louvre, there was this exhibition of Soviet arts, and in summer pavilion there was the Ukrainian exposition. Well, and two major works by Kateryna Bilokour presented there disappeared from the exhibition, were stolen. The letter from the director of Louvre of the time reads, I would say, very calm down, very matter-of-facted, kind of cynical, like we bring our apologies. If by date so and so the pictures will be, there were no precedents like this. We only discovered the loss while the exhibition was dismantled. If by date so and so the police will not find these pictures, of course we'll do the retribution, we'll pay you whatever, 40 rubles or whatever the price was. So in all likeliness, that was probably a bribe to some friend of the Soviet Union of the time, because the price of these pictures was, well, jumped high after Pablo Picasso noticed them and marveled them, and since he himself was a friend of the Soviet Union who was believing, you know, in the happy life of the working people down there, so he really pronounced some eulogy, something like, oh, if we were having a painter, like oh, this woman is a genius, yeah, well, if we were having, you know, a painter like this, we would have made the whole world marvel her works, and so on and so forth. Well, and after that, I assume, well, I mean, I assume, everyone assumes, because that's the most logical explanation why they disappeared. Probably there is still, you know, a hope that maybe in some private collection, somewhere in the cellar or in the safe, they are still hidden. But unfortunately now it's too late to trace this plot back. You know, the people who were responsible for the Soviet exhibition of the time.
Sorry, can I?
Oh, okay, sorry. I have more juicy, yeah, I have more juicy stories to tell, yes. Yeah, you got the point. Yeah.
Let's do the questions at the end, okay? So that we know that.
But please finish.
I just also wanted you a little bit mention, because you are the first women writer who was consciously thinking in feminist. You're the first feminist thinker, I would say, in Ukraine. And your work in the 90s, your essays, especially like field notes on Ukrainian sex, changed the whole...
Well, it's not an essay, it's a novel.
It's a novel.
And I still was a feminist against myself, you know, to use the term by Marta Bohachevsky. Okay, that was not the question.
The question is, what made you think in this direction? Your influence, your personal influence, and how in contemporary Ukrainian literature the topic of the body and the understanding of women and the body, their sexuality, is progressing after your work?
Well, I would say it's not just me, it's my generation of women. We were, okay, I need to say a couple of words about this fieldwork in Ukrainian sex, by the way, my only book that's translated into French. Well, basically it's translated into some, 21 language by now, though I think it's totally untranslatable. It's a one-woman monologue, and since the heroine is a poet, so she uses, my task was to show all the richness of her language. If the story were told by, I don't know, a bank assistant, it would have been a different story. So this is a novel which is very much grounded in the language, of course, but if once you have sex in the title, everyone wants to translate this one, and okay, I can't complain, of course, because this book did cause a havoc not only in Ukraine, but in a number of other countries. And recently, last year, there was the third Polish edition, and a young woman from Ruch Kobiet, women's movement of Poland. You know that abortions are prohibited in Poland according to the Polish law. Abortions are prohibited, and yes, women are discriminated quite severely. As Klementina Sukhanov, I don't know whether her book is translated into French, but the Polish leader of this women's movement, she published her book about the movement and about this entire story like half a year before Russian-Ukrainian war started. The title was "To jest wojna," this is war. Yes, it's a serious problem, and a young woman told me that she took this novel, she said, as a story, what it is about, that it is about female freedom. And I was very much moved with that, because that's something which was surrounding this big literary scandal that this book raised in Ukraine when it appeared, when it was published in the mid-90s. Then it was dubbed as the Bible of Ukrainian feminism. I can't say that I wanted to make a feminist point. It is not any ideological manifesto. It's a novel. The problem is that, yes, it was 1996, and that was the text from capital T, which the new generation of women with burden of independent Ukraine, with burdening women's movement, with burdening new consciousness, but everything still unshaped, needed as the book which they could take as their manifesto. You know, this world is being run by words, by texts. Every new trend, be it in ideology, in ideas, in fashion, in wherever, you know, it needs being texted in one way or another. It needs being taken into words. So field work in Ukrainian text became, you know, the Bible of Ukrainian feminism against my own will, so to speak. And yes, it did cause, you know, havoc, and goodness, I've been for a couple of years, I've been subjected to the gauntlet of the most outrageous criticism. Like half of the nation was booing, half of the nation was cheering. You know, the families were, I don't know, divorcing and everything. So yeah, this book did help to shape the first generation of women of independent Ukraine with a radically new, not post-Soviet, not related to Soviet in any way, but just with new type of consciousness. And when nowadays, you know, I have young women coming up to me saying, there were like about 10 cases like this already. Like my mom died young, well, mostly breast cancer, yeah. My mom died and I found your book in her archive. Please sign it to me. And it's extremely moving. Every time I have tears in my eyes because yes, you see the lineage. You see the continuation, and by bringing me this book from the late mom's archives, you know, they subscribe, it is like an oath of loyalty to the same case. So there is this continuation, there is already, you can say that, you know, in the second generation, you can say that it is already the tradition, yeah. Well, what helped me, what inspired me, you know, I would say that's more or less the same situation. Like you, first you learn, you grow up struggling for your own voice, but under the pressure of the dominant culture, which is male. And yes, you try to be a good girl. You know this good girl from this coupure I showed you, yeah. You try to obey the rules, but to be better than them guys, yeah. To prove that you can be better, to prove that you are worth something, yeah. Well, and then you realize that it is not actually your costume, that it does not fit. More or less, you know, in the late 20s, you already feel uncomfortable, okay? There are no models. You start this dialogue, you start again after Elaine Showalter, you know, you start struggling, you know, with this male culture. You do something, speaking of the same, okay, good example with this field work in Ukrainian sex. Well, in my early 20s, I was a big fan of Milan Kundera. Precisely, you know, in his way of writing about sex. You know, in my 20-something, and I did not know much about sex, definitely not that much as he did, you know, when he was writing the unbearable lightness of being. So I was having this sense of envy, like, well, great, wonderful. And yes, it was great and wonderful. I was charmed, I was particularly fascinated with how you can do in one sexual scene, having your characters at their most naked, portray them immediately, full scale. Well, in other situation it would have taken 30 pages, you know, to tell all that about the guy, you know, who is, well, one or two moments in bed, you know, and you immediately see the bastard, yeah? So, I mean, it's good, it's very good as a literary technique, it's great, you know, to have your characters in bed. In good literature, character is always a body. In a good, it is a sign of a good literature. Characters have bodies in good literature. And it was like, for me, it was, you know, like a subject of envy. I would love to do something like this from my point of view, because he is such a macho. He's, damn him, he's such a macho. I would love to do something, but from a woman's standpoint. So when Fieldwork in Ukrainian Sex was translated into Czech, and the major Czech newspaper, Lidové noviny, appeared with a big review, a picture of mine, a big review, and the title, Lady Kundera. So I said, yes, I made it. I made it. I did not tell the journalist anything about that, you know. I was not telling anyone. It's only afterwards, you know, that I made this confession that, yes, okay, that's the recognition when it comes, when it is translated into Czech, into the same language, okay, and then it is evaluated, you know, along with the standards, okay, it means I made it. So again, you know, it is a dialogue. I think it's more or less classical way of every woman artist, of every woman writer. The difference is that, you know, unlike Kateryna Bilokour, who was writing these extremely beautiful letters, you know, the extremely beautiful letters of an uneducated person. That's absolutely unique phenomenon. Because to be a good writer, you are supposed to have a certain literary background. There is naive painting, but there is no naive writing. You have to be schooled at writing. And she was damned good at that. She really was. I mean, not all letters, you know, you can see that it's been written by an uneducated person. But still, you know, there are so beautiful passages. And, I mean, the whole story and her whole personality, it can't be hidden. And it is so, it's absolutely pathetic, you know, it's a heartbreaking story, the story of her life and the story of her writing. So unlike our predecessors, be them uneducated or uneducated, you know, we were having, my generation of women, we were having the opportunities with the collapse of the Berlin Wall, you know, and with the collapse of the of the Soviet Union. We were having the opportunities that our predecessors never, ever were having. And by the way, it's a very good motivation when you think that, yes, yours is the first generation that has all these doors open that were closed for your mothers, grandmothers, and so on and so forth. So that's a long answer to your question.
Thank you. We are moving to the next presentation.
But there will be time for questions.
After. Yes.
I sit down here. Yeah?
Here is okay for the camera?
For the camera, no.
Please here.
So the next presentation will be by Oksana Brykhovecka. I already presented her. She's an artist, she writes about art. She is a curator and she did a lot of international projects and research projects about female artists. So she will present right now, and she is presenting from the United States. She graduated from Michigan University, where she is currently teaching and continuing studies. Oksana, please confirm if you hear us and if the light is okay, or you want us to make it even a little bit darker.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, I also hear you well. And do you see the screen?
Yes, we do.
So if you see like images in good quality, so it's fine. But sometimes it's helpful to turn off the light so they can hear you.
Do you hear from behind or?
I don't see your screen, so I don't know how do you see it.
No, don't do it because for the camera.
No.
Okay, we leave it like that because we are also recording, so that the recording is good.
Yeah, okay. But you can see images, yes?
Yes.
Okay. So hello everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. I would be glad, of course, to be in person, but since I'm very far, I will show you via Zoom my presentation. And thank you, Pani Oksana, for this empowering speech and this delve into Ukrainian history and important iconic figures. And also thank you for mentioning Kateryna Bilokour, because it will help me to make the transition to the art. And I will speak mostly about contemporary art of contemporary Ukraine, let's say, with providing some context from which it emerged. And of course today we all focused on the war, on the topic of war, and that's why when I got the questions from Oksana, it was for me a little bit like even challenging to go back to these times before war, but I think like the history is important, and it's important to follow the lineage and what came from where. So I will start my presentation. Just let me, I try to go to the next image. So you see the next image, yes?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so I will start my presentation mentioning Alla Horska, the artist who belonged to the cohort of so-called Шестидесятники, the dissident Ukrainian intelligentsia. And in this photo you see Alla Horska in front of the mosaic panel that she co-created. And this photo was done in 1970. In the beginning of 1970, less than the year before she was brutally assassinated by KGB because of her activism, her political position, fighting against oppression of Ukrainian human rights activists. So what is interesting, so in this image she's standing in the group of her male colleagues, and for me it is interesting to compare this photograph also with this image of mosaic itself, because here we also see one woman in the group of men, and it can tell us something about the gender dynamic in the Soviet times. At least I'm speaking now about late Soviet times. So the woman, she's included, she's important, she's kind of strong figure, but she is alone, she is unique among like men who are in majority and who also have more power, of course. And as an example of this dynamic, I can mention that among the chairmen of the Artists Union of the USSR, there was only one woman who took this position for only 3 years, from 1968 to 1971. And there were no women at all in the leadership of the National Union of Artists in Ukraine. from 1938 until now, because this organization still exists. And so for Soviet women of late Soviet time to develop a career, was important to seek a protection from men. And this led to very interesting situation that the generation, like for example my parents' generations, who were raised during the time, so the ideas of feminism were kind of foreign to them, and they didn't agree. The women, most of women didn't agree that they were oppressed or whatever. And here there are two paintings by Alla Horska in which she used this kind of underground quality of using blue and yellow, the colors of national Ukrainian flag, not official at that time, where she used woman's body. And on the left, of the image on the left, we see this woman body, like powerful, strong, and on the other image we see it bounded and silent. And I think it's revealed probably how artist felt herself in this society. So if she was too strong and unsubordinated enough to the Soviet authorities, so she just would be killed as Alla Horska was killed. And then we came to the next period, which is collapse of the Soviet Union and Ukraine gained independence. And it is interesting time because all this Soviet legacy that I described didn't disappear one day. And, but something new came, which we called freedom, and in particular sexual freedom. And these images demonstrate us this new aesthetic, which was very common in printed media, like eroticized images of women. And like, I think it's interesting phenomenon because those who gained from this sexual freedom were mostly men, because they suddenly gained access to these sexualized women bodies, which was not the case during Soviet time. And for women artists, if you speak about women artists, it was a pretty difficult time. That's why we see among the names of artists of this time, of the 90s, mostly male names, because for women, like being on the one hand, in this situation of still dominant ideas about male genius and women being like less recognized in art, but also being sexualized, put women in the position of being, rather than use, something different, and also like under male gaze, under male power. But I'm not intended to say that this kind of images, that this role was imposed on women 100% only by men, because there was some also agency, and I think the young women of this time, they also wanted to. So they were playing like in this eroticizing of their own body to gain some agency and to feel more liberated than their Soviet mothers were. And then I'm jumping like ahead, much more time ahead, into 2016, the time when there is already war in Ukraine. And this artwork in the form of people's calendar was created by Ksenia, where she critiqued this sexism and the position of women, which still exists in society till this time. So here we see, like in the middle of this disaster, the male who are in power, they possess this sexualized and utilized woman's body. But returning to this issue of women's agency in erotization of their bodies, I think this led us to this phenomenon of famine group who started using their topless bodies as resistance and as a political protest in their street actions in Ukraine between 2008 and 2013. And then, as you know, they immigrated to France. And because the aim of Femin was like to create images, media images. So at this time we see a lot of media images of brutalized women bodies by police. And so we see how female body became kind of a site of political fight. And also in art, this ideal, this ambiguity of nakedness, erotization, and the different types of social violence inflicted on the bodies came together as a political critique. And now I'm showing you part of my work that was created for the Ukrainian Body exhibition that I also created in 2012. And this exhibition was later closed and censored because the conversations about bodies and their politics was still very triggering for some part of Ukrainian society. Then also we have this video work by Oksana Chepeluk based on the essay collection of the same name by Oksana Zabushko, Chronicles of 14 Brass. And this video work considered also like as the first consciously feminist statement in Ukrainian contemporary art. And here we see a woman's body tortured by two male figures. And also this body represents not only women in patriarchal society, but also the body of Ukraine. So she is metaphor of Ukraine, metaphor of a land, of a territory, but also of a history. And here, like during Soviet times, the woman's figure of the motherland, usually glorified. Here we see its idea turned, we see the opposite. So the motherland is tortured, she's humiliated. And so this also still from this film. And I want to connect this with this image by Vlada, painted by Vlada Rauko, in which we also see the woman's body emerged from the earth, and this is a feeding body, but also it looks exploited and helpless because she kind of hide in this land. And in another painting by Vlada Rauko also we see this against this motif of breastfeeding of two males by headless woman's body. And I think like this image can have many layers of interpretations, from like male infantility and erasure of woman's subjectivity. And Vlada Rauko is very strong in depicting violence through the corporal metaphors. So I'm showing you like these images to show how a woman's body was presented during this period of Ukrainian independence by women artists as a gesture of critique, as a protest, as undermining this position of woman. And here we see again Vlada Rauko depicted this woman's body as fragmented, dismembered, or tied up and gagged. Also, there is another work, earlier work by Alina Kleitman, and it's kind of radical images that show us women's bodies reduced mostly to the garbage. And it's kind of traumatizing reenactment of the image of extreme sexism by the woman artist. And like it's difficult to say, is this a gesture of liberation, but definitely it's a social critique. And the artist, she kind of holding a mirror, reflecting that this is what you want to see in us. Another object installation created by Ksenia Khmelnytska for the exhibition Textus Embroidery Textile Feminism that I created in 2017. And this is a replica against both home violence and unpaid home labor performed by women, which often exist side by side. This is a performative work by Irina Kudryava from another exhibition that I created in 2015. The exhibition was called What in Me is Feminine. and Irina performed this captured woman's body, captured by domestic shell. And another important aspect for artist herself in this work was that her body, as she said, is separated, her head is separated from her body, which means that she still doesn't have, her body still doesn't have full agency. So some artists, as Dana Kavelina, for example, they created images and brought them to street demonstrations. So here you see the banner created by Dana in 2018, in which she depicted different types of violence inflicted on women body. It's state violence, religious, capitalist violence, and so on. And it was interesting story with this banner because during the demonstration on 8th of March it was confiscated by the police. Then another banner Dana created the next year for the street demonstration of 8th of March, and here she depicts this woman body that also refers to the idea of the land, of motherland. So the woman body that is giving birth to these people who later became soldiers, and she became the site not only of giving life but also of death. And generally, it is important to admit that, in particular during street protests, such as both Ukrainian revolutions, Orange Revolution and Maidan, the women's voices in art and contemporary art became much more stronger, and we, since this time, in the middle between two revolutions, we see like a lot of women artists emerge, which was like different from what we saw in the 90s. Here again, I'm showing you the image from the performance by Maria Kulikivska, and she demonstrates violence and aggressiveness, destructing the cast of the woman's body that she produced using her own body. And she performed it also naked. And it's like, in one hand, it's externalized aggression, and partly it's a self-aggression. And she is doing this in the context of war already, when the destruction of bodies became an everyday routine. And also this aggressiveness can be interpreted as a fighting back. And some similar tendency we see in these images by Vlada Ralko from her Kiev diary, which also show us like this strange female figure who is fighting back and probably even making some acts of revenge. And then we see a woman who turns into monster. This is a video work by Alina Kleitman, and I find it interesting in its multiple symbolism. Because what is happening here with this woman is in this act of mostly act of exorcism. Can be interpreting, like in one hand as vomiting out a tongue, or otherwise giving birth to a tongue. And I would say that this was an example of developing a specific language by women artists that show us kind of another woman, not a victim anymore, but rather something dangerous, something, some kind of monster or a witch. And here I choose a few public self-representation by Ukrainian women artists, like the photographs where they featured like in certain publications about them, so that this is how they wanted to appear in public. For example, Valentina Petrova, she practiced applying makeup that resembled breezes also for some of her public appearances in real life. And she explained this, that for her, the idea of woman in society always like goes together with the idea of violence. And but a woman should always like put this makeup to demonstrate beauty and cover all the remnants of trauma. So she wants to do something in opposite. So she looks for some other type of representations of her own image, including also she did selfies like this, that are beyond the idea of being good-looking, being beautiful. And Yulia Golub, the young artist, she used this beard to transgress her femininity. In the same way, like a heroine in her video of 2020 that calls Look, she has a beard. So here, like women, they transgress their gender, but not only like transgress their gender, but they also transform to something unknown, to kind of newly created creatures. And this playfulness blurs the ideas of traditional images of genders, which are still strong in Ukraine. And now I want to show you another example of work which also include woman's body, but in a more not so direct way. And this is image from the happening made by Valentina Petrova in 2016, and the happening, this performative action was called a stylish and elaborate dinner party consisting of gourmet dishes from world's best restaurants, luxuriously served at a reasonable price. So what artist did is she wanted to talk about poverty as a social problem in Ukraine, which is also experienced by artists because they obviously can't make their living from art. So she used a very popular cheap Ukrainian bread and mixed it with her own saliva while shaving, and she produced this bread mash that became kind of clay for her mini sculptures of these dishes that imitated expensive dishes from the restaurants. She painted them with watercolor and proposed to the viewers, to the visitors, to eat them with her together. So this, the body fluids such as saliva used speak us about, evoke like both feelings, like the ideas, disgust and connection. And here, the artist's body is presented through her saliva, and the act of eating is a reminiscent of rituals such as oblation, for example. And of course, it was challenging for visitors because she proposed them kind of corporal connection with the poverty. But also think about the symbolism of bread in Ukrainian culture. Bread for us is a basic food, but also sacred. And the roots of Ukrainians are among peasants that works on the fields, so-called bread makers. And here you see the project of Zhanna Kadyrova that she made in 2022 after Russian full-scale invasion in Ukraine started. The project called Polyanitsa, and Polyanitsa is the special type of Ukrainian bread, which became a symbol of Ukrainian identity and like a kind of secret password in the beginning of full-scale invasion, because Russians, they cannot pronounce it correctly, so the Russian speaker would pronounce it with the wrong accent. So, and Zhanna, she produced this installation with bread on the table, using the stones that she found in Carpathian mountains in Ukraine. So this bread is not eatable, of course, but it is symbolic, and it is connected with the land, because stones, obviously, they are part of the landscape. And because they are so hard and solid, they can also symbolize weapons. Like Polyanitsa is definitely a symbolic weapon. And today, during the full-scale war in Ukraine, there is a particular turn that I observed in art addressing land and landscape. And the artist Kateryna Bilokour, she depicted a lot of landscapes. And this one, we see again the part of a woman's body, like this feeding breast, but buried deep in the ground. And the words under the image say, our woman's body never have been so down to the earth. And I will purposely show you this screenshot from her Facebook page, so you see the date when she made and posted this image, which is April 1st, 2022. And of course, we see during the period after full-scale war, we see a lot of images of bodies and in women's art as well. So this is an image by Kateryna Bilokour. She created a lot during this time. So we see like woman's and child's body is victims. So woman's body is a victim of rape and murder lying on the ground. And the earth, like the ground, the earth here is kind of last refuge for these victims. And because the Ukrainian land is full of these dead bodies, that the land itself turns kind of to the tortured body, which we see here in this image again by Kateryna Bilokour, that landscape became bloody landscape. So this human body is like in blood. So blood is from human body extended to the landscape. And I think this symbolism comes from the fact that during the war, the spectrum of violence is much wider, and anyone can become a victim, and male bodies and female bodies are killed every day as soldiers, and all gender bodies killed as civilians. And so as Ukrainian land being attacked all the time, these wounds and destructions are depicted through the idea of pain that body experience. This also the still from the video by Dana Kavelina. It's a film collage called Letter to Turtle Dove, made in 2020. Mostly this film dedicated to the figure of woman's victim of rape during the war. But also, in one of her interviews about this work, Dana said that here there is another layer of imagery, an opportunity to think about the body of Donbass, which figuratively speaking also becomes vulnerable when factories and mines, houses and museums are destroyed. And we see like how she also incorporates this blood, this kind of bloody tears or bloody rain on top of the body of this landscape. Another image by Kateryna Bilokour with these destroyed buildings, and they kind of resemble us, parts of human bodies with the blood inside them. Again, Kateryna Bilokour, who made a huge amount of landscapes, and but it's a special landscape, so we don't see like the surface and the horizon, but we see what is in depth. We see what is inside this earth, and we see here edible and uneatable, which is mines. And here another image, like these mines, this danger that is rooted in our land today. And this image called Ukrainian garden, and Ukrainian and garden is also very important in Ukrainian folk culture, like among our symbols. But this garden today and this earth is a container not only for roots and fruits, but is also for mines, debris, and other remnants of the war. And another project is by Katya Buchatska, which was her research about the possible ideas of the future monuments of this war. And the starting point for her was the research of shell craters, the holes in the wounded land. And she says that the idea of the memorial came to me when I was looking at the aerial photograph of the shell fields. If we planted really in each shell hole, we could record these wounds to the earth. And this garden could become a living memorial. And in my point of view, this attention to the wounds of earth is very kind of female sensitivity and very feminist notion of care extended from the human bodies to the whole lands. And I want to finish my presentation showing you one of my tapestries that they made here in US in 2022-23 from the series Songs and Flowers for Ukraine. And it refers to the song about red viburnum that became very symbolic during this war. And here red viburnum, kalina, червона kalina, is a symbol of Ukraine, and its berries are bleeding also, and became kind of corporal metaphor of the bleeding Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Oksana, for such a rich and grounded presentation, and for the giving overview of this historical overview from the 60s to contemporary moment. It's really, as you said, important to track this lineage, and the history is very important. I don't know, we do performance right now? Yes.
I would do performance
I
right now.
think because it's too late. Yes. I think you can't stay with us, right?
Oh, yes, I would like to say.
You like to say, great. Thank you so much. Thank you again. So we... And now we will see the performative reading by Alla Horska. She will, Alla Horska, I think I didn't represent her well enough. She works with the topics, she works with video, she's a film director, and also she's a painter and performer, and she works with the topics of video, topics of body violence, dissemination of power and knowledge. She actually represents the whole new generation of artists working with these topics, and they always work collaboratively, and she represents the whole chain of women artists working together with the topics of body, and how this grassroots activity worked in Ukraine, the struggle for visibility, and now every one of almost are abroad, and how women artists, Ukrainian women artists surviving right now abroad, and how they continue to work.
So thank you for the previous guests and very important people for my personal development as an artist, and because I would say that drawing on the practices of our colleagues, other artists create their own paths and like inventing new or other approaches to what we call feminist art. And in order to continue this consistency, I would now read a text written by Lesya Ukrainka and Ukrainien as an introduction to zine Perlamutr, published this year in Berlin. And afterwards you will be able to see and then even get it for a very small symbolical price, which will be given to different organizations in Ukraine supporting people. We welcome you and invite you to be with us in this publication, to linger or lurk. We here is very concrete. The four female and genderqueer artists, Kateryna Bilokour, Uliana Buchenkova, Lesya Ukrainka, and me, Alla Horska, whose visual and textual statements have become together in this zine. But we also include, and would not be possible without certain places, contexts, and experiences. One of the key places for this collectivity is the city of Kiev. We meet each other in the field of cultivating a feminist art community, along with many friendly colleagues and agencies from a very distant and a very recent past. Our intuitions, closeness of experiences, as well as artistic and political aspirations, were unfolding into unexpected coincidences and were embodying themselves in a tangled series of events, accompanying emerging peaks and slopes. In the winter of 2021, we catch ourselves in the slopes of depression and respond by immersing ourselves in a routine of therapy. In global and individual crises, we need new ways of interacting. In early February, at the birth party of our dear friend Nasty Tier, we role-play while reading Blakitna Troyanda, The Blue Rose, Lesya Ukrainka's debut dramatic work and the first psychological drama in Ukrainian literature. Dialogues of heroines, dialogue with Lesya, dialogue of girlfriends, dialogue of dialogues, play. We engage in the romanticizations of our states, not to make a product out of them, but to give a space to oppressed and oppressive feelings, to celebrate stale breaths, to muster up the courage to try out the autoerotic angle of depression as an inexorable introversion. After being in the long but absolutely necessary isolation imposed on us in response to the pandemic, we want to try on all the costumes again, to layer ourselves into dresses, to organize a small but collective dressing up. On the 27th February 2021, in the space of Tag Gallery in Vazvizhenka neighborhood in Kiev, we are throwing a blue and red rose ball. By a delightful coincidence, February and March 2021 bring two anniversary events to the feminist altar: 150 years of Lesya Ukrainka and 150 years of Rosa Luxemburg. We'll continue. their predictions and declarations have been embodied throughout the past century, but their ideas remain relevant for the transformation of modern politics, our politics. To move them and with them, we use different strategies. One of them, mellow and passionate, turns out to be the organization of the ball. We dedicate the ball to our situation of depression and invite friends to a reflexive celebration. We cook and eat blue. Cakes. Prepare and burn red roses, effigies of sadness and disorientation roots, patriarchy and capitalism. With murmurs and whispers, we send greetings to Agent Moira, following the traces of feminist researchers who, in a plot of madness, see the escapade resistance of fin de siècle heroines. Now our perception of this narrative, important in its time for our understanding not only of Lesya's works, but also of ourselves, is transforming under the influence of attentive feminist disability studies. They emphasize that the romanticization and metaphorization of mental disorders and disabilities threatens to erase the visibility of real obstacles and struggle. From this perspective, the popular feminist frame of madness as a madness? From this perspective, the popular feminist frame of madness as a rebellion becomes more complicated and problematized in such important aspects as death, freedom of choice, accessibility, visibility, mindfulness, care, stigmatization, distribution of resources and privileges, representation. This perspective is not only interesting, but also important to apply to the reading of Lesya Ukrainka, who herself had chronic illnesses and disabilities, which are often perceived as a reason for her glorification and ground for speculative metaphors. Our act, as well as the zine, is framed from the inside with the song Bread and Roses, an important feminist slogan born in the struggle of women workers for their labor rights in the early 20th century in the United States, at the same time when the main characters of our ball lived. We do not seek to apply the Western idea of history to ourselves, but we cannot deny its influence on us. First, we sing the song slogan with our voices, and then, over the course of 2 years, we translate it into our own language, not only linguistically, but also contextually and politically, laying down and combing over and over all the ethical and poetic twigs. We dream of a sequel of the possibility of bread and rolls feast. Ми крокуєм у новий прекрасний день, між лікарнями чути пропаганди, щоб усі почули заклик. Хліб троянди, хліб троянди. We dream of planting blackberry bushes on the landslide hills of Vozbizhenka neighborhood to strengthen the fluid soil. A practical and symbolic gesture worthy of admiration. Blackberry ice cream was the only food that Lesya Ukrainka ate in the last days of her life. But the roots and thorns of imaginary blackberry cannot hold the time that crumbles. Lesya's next birthday, 25th February 2022, we meet in sleepless bomb shelters. A year ago, we celebrated a tragic ball, and now we are leaving the country due to a full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. After another year, we find ourselves in new geographical and mental circumstances, where we cannot translate our trauma, but are bold enough to share it with others. And not for avoiding or denying it, but to deepen our understanding, to observe trauma as transformation. The mixing of languages and histories, they need to become a part of a different, sometimes contradictory realities, make us to invent new surjik, elements of different languages and temporalities, which are combined artificially, but in fact very organically and inevitably, that have no place in literary and generally any norms. In the space of surjik and its mechanisms, translation is never enough. Translation is multiplied by the hybridity of meanings layered on the hybridity of contexts, and overgrown with nuances and references, most of which lie not on the surface, but in the nooks and crannies of the narratives. We are once again returning to the corners dear to our hearts, the plots of Lesya Ukrainka. Contrary to linear time, we are in the time of drama fieri Lisova Pisnya, the forest song. Feminist time, where here is enough space for grief, change, empathy, fragility, mutual understanding, not only through speech, but also simply through coexistence. Trying to expand the space of coexistence, in April 2023, we are doing a second ball dedicated to our own situation of trauma. It is embodied as a part of the project How Do We Turn Salt into Sugar in the historical space Paul House Wedding in Berlin. In the course of preparing the project, responding to depression and remoteness, we strive for a new assemblage of dissembled collectivity, framing our common and individual agency as it should be. We joyfully imagine colors and play with languages, in dialogue giving birth to Mother Pearl, Perlamutter, a matrix space of multicolor where originate the sparkles of ideas' daughters, spread all over the world as cultural agents of our Ukrainian existence. A magnificent, radiant, and resistant covering that unites us without any thread in a virtual call space. Welcome to Perlamutr, Ukrainian feminist culture in exile. We open its flaps with this publication. And yeah, you can look, this zine is here, only 10 pieces, but they're open for sale, 10 euros, and there goes. And it's printed on Riso printer. I think you might know what is it, but it actually works as an assemblage of posters which you can take out, and they're both sides. There is something. This is this text which I read, and there is this song which I also sang in translation to Ukrainian, but also in transliteration and translation of translation. Yes. And this is also from it's my page, let's say, a piece of my film, new film, some experts of my film and stills. This is a page of Uliana Pechenkova. It's actually, let's say, another way of presenting the work she made for the exhibition I mentioned also in this text, How Do We Turn Salt into Sugar. It was the exhibition and the event. And these two pages are for Kateryna Bilokour. It's her story based on her experience of being internally displaced twice. First time in 2014 when the war started, and then in 2022 when everyone noticed it. Yeah. So yeah, you can take a closer look, but I think also.
Thank you so much for the performance. I want to thank each participant because it was very much about many links between each of you, and I think that the broader landscape of Ukrainian female in Ukrainian literature and art and history was opened to the public. So it was very important, and I very much thank you for your patience and for what you do. It's changing the world.
Oh, I forgot to say something. I forgot to say that. I mean, it wasn't like performance, so we announced it as a performative reading, because actually the script for the action itself, for the reading itself, was written by Valentina Petrova, a co-author of the film Sisters, which already been shown to date during the screening.